Welcome to the pink side. I wore her skirt. Now she controls my closet. I never thought a simple visit to my mom's friend's house would turn my life upside down. My name's Alex, a 20-year-old college student who's always been fascinated by fashion and crossdressing, but mostly in private. It wasn't about rebellion or attention. It was about exploring sides of myself that no one at school or work would understand. My apartment was my sanctuary, filled with makeup, skirts, and shoes neatly arranged, each piece carefully chosen for when I indulged in this private world. Mom's friend, Mrs. Darlene, had invited her niece over for the weekend. But when she walked in and caught sight of me in one of my carefully curated outfits, soft pastel dress, silky tights, and heels, her eyes widened. "Oh my, you look just like my niece," she exclaimed, her voice filled with delight. I froze mid-step, a blush creeping across my cheeks. I hadn't planned to meet her today in this state. The apartment was cozy, filled with warm lighting, old photographs, and the faint scent of lavender. Normally, I felt comfortable here visiting Mom casually, but today, the stakes felt different. I was no longer Alex, the son who came for coffee and chatter. I had been thrust into a persona I couldn't abandon. Cutie, the perfect image of Mrs. Darlene's niece. Emma, my girlfriend, knew about my crossdressing. She had been supportive from day one, fascinated by the way I transformed and the confidence it gave me. She had encouraged me to explore this side of myself, often helping me pick outfits or apply makeup. But even Emma didn't know the level of improvisation that would be required today. I felt a mixture of thrill and terror, the thrill of stepping fully into Cutie's shoes, and the terror that one wrong word, one small misstep, would reveal my secret. The first moments were awkward. Mrs. Darlene ushered me to the living room, where she had set out tea and snacks. I perched delicately on the edge of the sofa, heels resting lightly on the hardwood floor. "You must stay with us this weekend," she said warmly, her tone giving no room for refusal. I forced a polite smile, nodding. Emma's eyes flickered with worry, silently asking if I was okay with this. I whispered back, "I can do it. It's just a weekend, we'll manage." As she chattered about family events, cousins, and childhood stories, I tried to maintain Cutie's persona. Soft nods, delicate gestures, polite laughter. It all had to be perfect. I could feel every movement, every expression, and every syllable being scrutinized. My pulse was high, and my mind raced with strategies. How to keep her convinced, how to avoid slipping into Alex's natural mannerisms, how to remain this niece seamlessly. I noticed Emma leaning back in her chair, watching carefully. "You look amazing," she whispered under her breath, and I felt a wave of warmth. Her presence grounded me, reminding me that while I had to pretend for Mrs. Darlene, I wasn't alone in this. Emma had become my silent partner in this delicate act, someone who understood both the thrill and the fear that came with stepping into Cutie's persona. Then came the first challenge. Mrs. Darlene insisted on showing me her niece's room. "You can unpack a few things. Make yourself comfortable," she said brightly. The room was a perfect reflection of a young woman's world. Pastel walls, shelves lined with dolls and books, and a vanity with a neat row of makeup and hair accessories. I hesitated, knowing this was an opportunity to solidify my cover. With careful grace, I unpacked my small bag of essentials, placing my items subtly among hers, pretending they belonged to me. Every small act, arranging the brushes, adjusting the mirror, sitting gracefully on the vanity stool, felt like a test. Alex would be slipping in if I wasn't careful. Cutie had to be flawless. Emma watched from the doorway, giving me a reassuring nod. It was a delicate dance, blending reality and performance, identity and disguise. By dinner, Mrs. Darlene was completely convinced. "I can't believe how much you look like her. You're practically twins," she gushed. I smiled, keeping my voice soft and demure, careful not to laugh too loudly or move too confidently. Alex's natural tendencies, my casual posture, my easy sarcasm, had to be suppressed. Every detail of my persona had to be precise. As I lay in the guest bed that night, fully dressed in my soft skirt and blouse, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The thrill of being admired, of being fully immersed in Cutie, clashed with the fear of being discovered. I knew the next 2 days would be a delicate balance of observation, improvisation, and suspense. One small mistake, and the careful illusion would crumble. This was no longer just a weekend visit. It had become a test of identity, courage, and adaptability. Cutie wasn't just a persona anymore. She was a lifeline, a thrilling experiment, and a secret that could change everything if revealed. And as I drifted to sleep, the thought lingered. Could I maintain the act? Could I survive the weekend pretending to be someone else entirely, while hiding the real me from everyone around me? Morning light spilled softly through the pastel curtains of the guest room. I stirred, still half asleep, but the reality of the weekend hit me immediately. I wasn't just visiting. Cutie had to exist for the next few days. I carefully adjusted the blouse and skirt I had slept in, smoothing out wrinkles, making sure the delicate details were perfect. Every morning movement became a performance. Alex couldn't show, only Cutie. Emma had stayed the night too, under the pretense of a casual visit. She smiled at me across the breakfast table, whispering, "Remember, you're amazing. Just be yourself well, Cutie." I chuckled softly, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. The challenge wasn't just external. Being scrutinized by Mrs. Darlene, being watched closely, there was also the constant internal tension of maintaining a completely different identity. Mrs. Darlene greeted me warmly. "I hope you slept well, dear. Today, we're going out to run a few errands." "I can't wait to see you in action," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I froze for a second. Action? My mind raced. What if someone outside recognizes me? What if my voice slips? What if Alex's mannerisms betray me? We left the house, and every step was calculated. Cutie had to walk gracefully, respond gently, and speak softly. I noticed small details everywhere. The way I held my purse, the tilt of my head, even the placement of my hands. Emma walked a step behind, guiding me subtly. "Relax your shoulders, tilt your chin slightly, perfect," she whispered. Her support was grounding. I could feel the thrill of transformation, each detail making Cutie feel more real, more alive. The first real challenge came at a cafe where Mrs. Darlene wanted to meet her friends. I was introduced as her niece, and every word I spoke had to maintain the illusion. Compliments flowed. She gushed about how much I resembled her family. I smiled demurely, using the soft, melodic voice Emma had helped me practice. But inside, my pulse raced. Every glance, every curious stare, every subtle assessment felt like a test I couldn't fail. After coffee, we walked through a boutique. Mrs. Darlene insisted I pick out a dress as a gift. Holding the delicate fabric against my body, feeling the smooth texture and the weight of the skirt, I felt a familiar thrill, the sensation of transformation, of stepping fully into Cutie. Emma whispered pointers. "Try to imagine her niece would love this. Move gracefully, speak lightly, admire it genuinely." I did, slowly feeling the lines between Alex and Cutie blur. Lunch was another test. The waitstaff commented on my appearance, complimenting my style. My heart raced with a combination of excitement and fear. Could they sense the deception? Did they notice the subtle cues that this wasn't really Mrs. Darlene's niece? I sipped my drink carefully, smiling softly, maintaining Cutie's composed posture. Every small action reinforced the persona, but the effort was exhausting. Alex's natural reflexes constantly threatened to slip through. Back at the house, I was allowed to use the vanity to freshen up. I applied a light layer of makeup, brushing soft shades of blush on my cheeks and carefully applying mascara to elongate my lashes. The ritual was soothing, yet filled with tension. Each stroke brought Cutie to life, but also reminded me of the fragile line I was walking. A small wobble on the stool made me flinch, and Emma caught my hand, steadying me. "You're perfect," she whispered, and a wave of reassurance flowed through me. Evening arrived with more social interaction. Mrs. Darlene had arranged a small gathering of neighbors. I stepped into the room with careful poise, heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. Eyes turned toward me, curious and admiring. Compliments flowed, Laughter followed, and I played my part flawlessly, yet the anxiety never left. Every conversation was a subtle minefield. One wrong word, one misstep, and Alex would be revealed. By the time I returned to the guest room, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. Cutie had survived the first day, impressed Mrs. Darlene, and maintained the illusion seamlessly. Yet, the internal struggle remained intense. Every fiber of Alex's being wanted to relax, to breathe naturally, but I couldn't. Cutie demanded vigilance, attention to detail, and constant awareness. The thrill of transformation was intoxicating, but the stress was equally powerful. As I lay in bed that night, brushing out my hair and adjusting the outfit for comfort, I reflected on the day. The weekend had only just begun, and I already felt the weight of the dual identities pressing down. Cutie was alive, vibrant, and admired, but Alex's anxiety lingered, whispering warnings of exposure, failure, and ridicule. I drifted to sleep with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow promised new challenges, greater scrutiny, and the constant threat of slipping back into Alex in front of everyone. The morning sun streamed through the window, warming the pastel walls of the guest room. Today promised more social interaction, and with it a new layer of tension. Mrs. Darlene had planned a small brunch with her close friends, which meant I had to navigate multiple sets of eyes scrutinizing every gesture, every word. Alex's nerves were buzzing. Cutie had to remain flawless. I dressed carefully, selecting a soft floral dress with delicate lace accents, matching heels, and a light cardigan. The fabrics brushed against my skin, reminding me of the thrill I felt when fully embracing Cutie. Each step toward the vanity was ritualistic, applying makeup with precision, carefully curling my lashes and adjusting my hair until it framed my face perfectly. Emma hovered quietly, giving small reassurances. "Relax your posture," she whispered. "You're mesmerizing." Her encouragement fueled my confidence, but also highlighted how precarious the balance between Alex and Cutie truly was. At the brunch, the energy of the room was immediately overwhelming. Mrs. Darlene's friends greeted me warmly, commenting on how much I resembled her niece. Compliments and questions came rapidly: favorite hobbies, school achievements, interests. I responded softly, keeping my tone light and melodic, yet internally tallying every word for potential pitfalls. Alex's natural sarcasm or casual phrasing could ruin the illusion in a heartbeat. The first real challenge arose when one of the friends, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, began comparing me to photos of Mrs. Darlene's niece. "Your smile, it's exactly the same. And your eyes," she said, leaning closer. My heart raced. Could she see through the subtle differences? I smiled demurely, forcing a tilt of my head I had practiced with Emma. "Thank you," I said softly, trying to convey sincerity while masking my panic. Patricia seemed satisfied, and the moment passed, but it left me shaking slightly inside. Lunch continued with casual conversation, but every glance felt like an inspection. My nerves manifested physically. My fingers fidgeted with the edge of my skirt, and my heels clicked more sharply than intended against the hardwood floor. Each step reminded me of the fragile persona I was maintaining. Emma leaned close at one point, murmuring, "Breathe, you're doing amazing." Her words grounded me, allowing me to regain composure and continue performing Cutie flawlessly. Later, Mrs. Darlene suggested a walk through the nearby park. The fresh air was a relief, but the public setting introduced new hazards. Onlookers passing by could comment or stare, and the slightest slip could expose the deception. I adjusted my dress nervously and kept my posture perfect, every movement deliberate. Emma walked beside me, her presence both comforting and a subtle reminder that I was being observed even more closely. The walk became a subtle test of social skill. A neighbor approached, greeting Mrs. Darlene warmly. "And who is this lovely young lady?" she asked, smiling warmly. "This is my niece," Mrs. Darlene replied proudly. My heart pounded, but I smiled, responding with soft words, nodding, and using Cutie's practice gestures. The neighbor complimented my outfit and hair, and I felt a fleeting rush of validation, but it was tinged with fear. Each interaction reminded me that one misstep could unravel the weekend's delicate balance. Back at the house, the tension didn't fade. Mrs. Darlene suggested I help with a small household project, organizing her bookshelf. Normally mundane, this task became a performance. I carefully arranged books, aligning spines perfectly, and even mimicked the movements of Mrs. Darlene's niece, as described in old family photos I had glimpsed. Each movement was deliberate, every gesture reinforcing the illusion. Emma watched from a distance, offering subtle corrections, like a silent coach guiding me through a tightrope walk. As the evening approached, I felt the duality of Alex and Cutie more acutely than ever. Alex wanted to relax, to laugh naturally, to drop the pretense. But Cutie required vigilance, precision, and constant awareness. The thrill of embodying Cutie, the excitement of admiration and acceptance, mingled with the anxiety of exposure. Every smile, every movement, every word was a delicate balance between these two identities. Before bed, I practiced in the mirror again, trying different expressions, gestures, and tones to ensure Cutie's persona was airtight. Emma assisted, adjusting my hair and posture, whispering encouragement. "You're convincing, captivating, you could fool anyone." Her words were both exhilarating and frightening. I realized that while I had mastered the outward appearance, the inner tension was growing, a constant undercurrent threatening to surface at any moment. By the time I lay down, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The day had tested my ability to navigate scrutiny, maintain composure, and embody Cutie convincingly. Each interaction, each compliment, each challenge had reinforced the duality of my existence this weekend. I knew the coming days would only intensify the suspense, the internal conflict, and the thrill of transformation. Tomorrow promised new encounters, unexpected tests, and the ever-present fear of being exposed. The morning light was sharper now, filtering through the living room windows as I carefully descended the staircase. Today, Mrs. Darlene had invited a few family friends over for a casual gathering, which meant I would be under even more observation. My stomach tightened. Each new face introduced new scrutiny, new potential hazards for the delicate illusion of Cutie. I dressed in a soft pastel blouse and a pleated skirt, pairing them with modest heels that clicked softly against the polished floor. I brushed my hair meticulously, making sure every strand fell perfectly, and applied a light layer of makeup that highlighted my eyes and softened my features. Emma hovered nearby, offering gentle reminders. "Remember, a slight tilt of your head, a soft smile. Perfect." Her guidance was indispensable, but each correction was a subtle reminder of how easily Alex could slip through. The first challenge arrived immediately as Mrs. Darlene's friends entered. I was introduced as her niece, and the room buzzed with polite conversation. Compliments flowed freely on my appearance, my demeanor, my mannerisms, and each one sent a shiver of both excitement and anxiety down my spine. The thrill of admiration was intoxicating, but the fear of exposure was equally intense. One wrong word, one unintentional gesture, and the illusion could crumble. Midway through the gathering, an unexpected twist arose. A distant relative from out of town appeared, someone I had never met but who apparently had known Mrs. Darlene's niece well. She squinted at me, tilting her head in curiosity. "You've grown, but your voice, it's slightly different," she commented. My heart hammered. Alex instinctively wanted to laugh or reply casually, but Cutie required measured, gentle responses. I smiled softly, nodding demurely, and stammered a polite, practiced answer. The tension was suffocating. Emma's reassuring hand on my shoulder reminded me to maintain composure. As the afternoon unfolded, more subtle tests emerged. Conversations steered toward family traditions, childhood stories, and shared memories. Each question was a potential minefield. I relied on Emma's whispered guidance, carefully threading answers that matched what I had learned about Mrs. Darlene's niece from photos and overheard stories. The performance required constant vigilance, but gradually, I began to feel a strange flow, the persona of Cutie starting to overshadow Alex's natural instincts. A small, symbolic moment intensified the tension. While reaching for a decorative vase, my sleeve caught the edge of a table, sending a figurine wobbling. I froze, heart racing, and caught it just in time. A soft gasp escaped me, but I managed to cover it with a delicate laugh, maintaining Cutie's composed image. The near slip reminded me of how fragile this masquerade was. Every gesture mattered. Every movement could betray me. Even outside the house, the scrutiny continued. Mrs. Darlene insisted on a short walk in the garden to show me some newly planted flowers. The fresh air and blooming colors should have been relaxing, but the presence of a visiting neighbor who claimed to know the real niece made each step feel like a tightrope walk. I adjusted my posture, smoothed my skirt, and smiled naturally, praying that my gestures and expressions aligned perfectly with the persona I had cultivated. The emotional tension inside me grew more acute. Alex wanted to relax, to be himself, but Cutie demanded constant awareness. Every compliment, every careful glance, every whispered comment from Emma reinforced the delicate balance. The thrill of becoming someone admired and adored was intense, but it was inseparable from the fear of discovery. I felt a shiver run down my spine every time someone focused on me for longer than a moment. By late afternoon, the tests escalated further. A casual comment about fashion trends forced me to defend a choice I hadn't rehearsed. I improvised, borrowing phrases and expressions Emma had suggested, and managed to respond convincingly. The relief was immediate but fleeting. The constant pressure left me drained, yet exhilarated. I realized that Cutie was no longer just a temporary persona. The adrenaline of performance, the thrill of maintaining the secret, and the subtle empowerment from compliments were beginning to intertwine with my own identity. As evening approached, I retreated to the guest room to freshen up and gather my thoughts. I removed my heels, massaging my feet, and reflected on the day's events. Each interaction had been a test, each compliment a validation, each near slip a reminder of the fragility of my masquerade. Alex's anxiety and Cutie's emerging confidence were in constant conflict, a tension that left me both exhausted and exhilarated. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my hair and reviewing my expressions. I noticed subtle changes in the way I carried myself, the posture, the tilt of the head, the gentle curve of a smile. Cutie was no longer just a role I was playing. The persona was merging with me, slowly reshaping Alex's instincts. Emma's words echoed softly in my mind. "You're captivating, remember. You can handle anything." I nodded, trying to internalize the strength and confidence that were becoming part of me. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting intricate shadows across the living room. Today's challenge was far more demanding. Mrs. Darlene had invited her extended family over for a small gathering. Everyone knew her niece personally, and I was expected to maintain the illusion flawlessly. My heart pounded, and I could feel Alex's nervous energy vibrating beneath Cutie's composed exterior. I selected an elegant outfit, a light pink dress that complemented my skin tone, paired with delicate flats. My hair was styled in soft waves, and makeup accentuated my eyes and lips without looking overdone. Each layer of clothing, each stroke of makeup, felt like armor. Emma hovered nearby, whispering subtle guidance. "Remember your gestures, your posture. You're doing perfectly," she reassured, though I could see the tension in her eyes mirrored my own. As the family arrived, my nerves spiked. Familiar faces scrutinized me, looking for any hint of inconsistency. "It's been so long since we last saw you," one relative exclaimed, leaning in to examine me closely. I responded with a soft, practiced smile, using phrases Emma had coached me on. Every compliment was a thrill, yet each moment carried the sharp edge of anxiety. The first real test came unexpectedly. A cousin, known for his sharp wit, leaned closer and asked, "Did you always have that mischievous glint in your eyes, or is it new?" I froze for a heartbeat. Alex's instinct would have been to laugh or respond sarcastically, but Cutie required a measured, delicate answer. I forced a gentle smile and replied, "I suppose some things never change," careful to mimic the niece's typical tone. The cousin chuckled but seemed satisfied, and I exhaled in relief, though my heart continued to race. Later, the gathering moved to the garden for refreshments. Sunshine and fresh air should have been calming, but the outdoor setting introduced new risks. Passers-by glanced at us, neighbors waved, and my heels clicked nervously on the stone path. Emma stayed close, subtly guiding my posture and gestures, ensuring Cutie remained believable. Each interaction was a balancing act between charm, composure, and the constant fear of exposure. A sudden, symbolic moment heightened the tension. While reaching for a pitcher of lemonade, I accidentally brushed against a decorative birdcage, sending it rattling. All eyes turned toward me. My face flushed, and I froze, heart hammering. Then, instinctively, I composed myself, laughing lightly as Cutie would, and steadied the cage. The room relaxed, and no one questioned the incident, but the near slip reminded me of how precarious the act truly was. Conversation turned to childhood anecdotes, which were particularly tricky. Relatives asked about hobbies, school experiences, and personal quirks. I had memorized details from photos and past stories, but improvisation was occasionally necessary. Each response required caution. One misstep could unravel months of preparation. Emma whispered guidance from the side, subtle corrections that saved me from embarrassment. Her presence was both comforting and a stark reminder of my dual identity, Alex versus Cutie. As the afternoon wore on, my physical and emotional fatigue grew. Every movement, every smile, every word demanded vigilance. Alex wanted to relax, to breathe freely, but Cutie demanded precision and charm. The exhilaration of maintaining the illusion mingled with fear, creating a dizzying cocktail of emotions. I could feel a strange shift. Cutie was no longer just a role. The persona was merging with me, reshaping my instincts, my posture, and even the way I thought. By evening, the gathering began winding down, yet the tension lingered. I retreated briefly to a quiet corner, massaging my feet and taking deep breaths. Emma joined me, adjusting my hair and whispering reassurance. "You've done wonderfully," she said, "and tomorrow will be even more thrilling." I nodded, acknowledging her words, but inside, Alex felt both exhilarated and drained. The stakes had risen dramatically, and the fear of exposure was at its peak. Before bedtime, I stood in front of the mirror once more. The reflection staring back at me was a delicate blend of Alex and Cutie. The transformation was not merely physical, it had seeped into posture, expression, and confidence. I realized that the upcoming day, with its new challenges and potential surprises, would demand every ounce of composure, improvisation, and courage. The thrill and tension intertwined, leaving me exhausted yet eager, knowing that the climax of this elaborate masquerade was imminent. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains with a harsh clarity that made every shadow seem more pronounced. Today, Mrs. Darlene had arranged a specialty gathering with a few colleagues she trusted, but each one had apparently known her niece from school or summer visits. The stakes were higher than ever. Every word, every gesture could betray me. I chose a delicate lavender dress, carefully paired with white flats. My hair was pinned into soft curls, and my makeup highlighted the gentle curve of my lips and the shimmer in my eyes. Each item was more than clothing or cosmetics. It was armor, a shield that allowed Cutie to exist in the world without immediate suspicion. As the first guests arrived, my nerves tightened into a knot. Introductions were swift, and compliments flowed, each one a double-edged sword. Admiration brought confidence, yet the pressure to maintain the illusion was relentless. I smiled demurely, tilted my head, and tried to emulate the behaviors I had observed in photos and heard about from Emma. The first real challenge came unexpectedly. One of the guests leaned in, scrutinizing me closely. "You look just like her," she said softly, "but your voice, it's slightly different." My stomach dropped. Every nerve in my body screamed in panic. Alex's instinct was to laugh nervously, but Cutie required careful composure. I softened my voice, adopted a gentle, playful tone, and responded in a way that mirrored the niece's known mannerisms. Relief washed over me as the guest nodded approvingly, but the tension remained thick. As the tea progressed, The gathering moved to a small lounge area. The space was cozy, but it amplified every sound. The clink of cups, the shuffle of feet, and the low murmur of conversation. I felt hyper-aware of my body, the sway of my hips, the tilt of my shoulders, and the careful placement of my hands. Emma stayed nearby, whispering reminders and subtly adjusting my posture. I was performing, and the audience was unforgiving. Suddenly, a symbolic moment jolted me. I reached for a teacup, and my sleeve caught the edge of the table, tipping it slightly. The cup wobbled dangerously, threatening to spill. My heart raced, but I steadied it with a swift, practiced motion, letting out a soft, controlled laugh. The minor incident passed, but the reminder of fragility lingered. Every action could betray the persona I had cultivated, and every slip felt magnified under the careful eyes of the visitors. A question about childhood memories tested me further. The guest asked about a summer trip she remembered the niece taking, detailing specific events. Panic surged. I had rehearsed many stories, but some details were hazy. Emma whispered guidance, helping me navigate through improvisation without exposing my true identity. I responded carefully, blending rehearsed details with improvisation, and the guest accepted my answers with a smile. The relief was immediate, but my mind was exhausted from the constant vigilance. By mid-afternoon, the tension had escalated. Another guest casually commented on my confidence for someone so young, which sent a shiver through me. Alex wanted to relax, to let the mask drop, but Cutie demanded perfection. Every movement, word, and expression had to align with the persona. I could feel my body responding differently, my posture more upright, my voice softer, my gestures more refined. Cutie was no longer just a disguise. She was becoming an extension of me. The suspense increased when a delivery arrived, a large box intended for Mrs. Darlene. The courier called out, and all eyes shifted briefly toward the door. Emma gently guided me out of sight, murmuring, "Stay calm, just breathe." Behind the closed door of the guest room, my heart raced as I imagined every possible way the visitors might glimpse something that could betray me. The isolation was brief, but intense, a symbolic reminder of how fragile my position was. When I re-entered the room, the visitors' attention returned. I walked in with measured steps, smiled gracefully, and engaged in light conversation. The adrenaline surged, making my movement sharper, my focus intense. Each interaction was a tightrope act, each glance a potential hazard. I was both exhilarated and terrified, caught between the thrill of maintaining the illusion and the fear of being exposed. By the end of the gathering, I realized that I had survived multiple tests, close calls, and subtle traps. Yet the experience had drained me physically and emotionally. Alex felt exhausted, but Cutie had gained strength, confidence, and presence. The dual identity was more entangled than ever, and I understood that the next series of events would push the stakes even higher, toward the ultimate climax of the masquerade. The afternoon sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the living room where Mrs. Darlene's guests were still gathered. I could feel the weight of every gaze, every question, as if each glance might pierce the delicate veil of my disguise. My lavender dress now felt like armor too heavy to bear, and every subtle movement required vigilance. The first twist came when Mrs. Darlene's cousin, a keen-eyed woman who rarely missed a detail, began asking about school activities and friends the niece supposedly had. I swallowed hard, realizing that some details I had only vaguely memorized. Alex's natural tendency would be to fidget or stammer, but Cutie required poise and elegance. I relied on the soft guidance of Emma, who whispered subtle cues, helping me navigate the tricky questions with confidence. "Your school art project last year?" the cousin asked, leaning in slightly. "Wasn't it the one with the butterflies?" Panic surged. I could recall the niece's summer art submissions, but not this specific one. I forced a calm smile, adding, "Yes. I remember working on it for weeks. It was so intricate, but I loved every minute of it." The cousin nodded, seemingly satisfied, but my chest was tight with the effort it had taken to avoid a slip. Then came an unexpected obstacle. A phone rang loudly from the kitchen. Mrs. Darlene excused herself to answer, And in her absence, one of the guests casually remarked, "It's incredible how much you've grown. Your voice has matured, though. Are you sure you're the same age as I remember?" My mind raced. Alex wanted to shrink back, to hide, but Cutie required a measured response. I adjusted my posture, smiled sweetly, and replied with a slightly higher, gentler tone. The comment passed without suspicion, but the tension coiled tighter in my chest. A symbolic moment heightened the drama. While reaching for a glass of water, I accidentally brushed against the edge of the table again, sending a delicate vase wobbling. Time seemed to slow. My heart pounded, hands trembling slightly. I steadied the vase with a quiet laugh, but the near mishap echoed the fragility of my situation. Every object, every movement could betray me, and I felt like a performer balancing on a knife's edge. As the gathering continued, I noticed subtle changes in the guests' behavior. Their curiosity, though polite, was intense, and every glance seemed to probe for hidden inconsistencies. Alex's anxiety spiked. Would they notice the slight difference in voice or posture? Emma subtly guided me, whispering corrections that kept the illusion intact. Her presence was both a lifeline and a constant reminder of the duality I lived in. The next challenge arose when a guest pulled out old photographs, expecting me to recognize faces and events. My stomach dropped. Some of the images were familiar from past family visits, while others were vague memories I had pieced together from Emma's notes. I studied each carefully, nodding, smiling, and commenting with vague but confident phrases. The tension in my shoulders eased slightly with each successful response, but the effort was exhausting. Just when I thought I could breathe, Mrs. Darlene returned, holding a small package of treats she had prepared. She handed them out, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Cutie, you always know how to make everyone feel comfortable," she said warmly. The compliment should have felt comforting, but instead, it reminded me of the precariousness of my role. Every word from her was a test, every gesture a subtle evaluation. By the end of the afternoon, I was physically tired but emotionally heightened. Alex's nerves were frayed, but Cutie had become more confident, more fluid in social interactions. Yet I knew the most critical tests were still ahead. The evening would bring new guests, new questions, and the constant threat of exposure. The dual identity was merging deeper than ever, and I felt the strain of maintaining two personas growing heavier by the minute. Evening had arrived, and the gathering shifted to the living room for tea and light snacks. The dim lighting softened the edges of the room, but it also magnified every movement. I could feel my heartbeat in my chest as Cutie, the persona I had embodied for weeks, walked delicately among the guests. A sudden twist escalated the stakes. Mrs. Darlene's niece, a cousin I had never met in person, entered unexpectedly. She was younger than I had imagined, with sharp eyes and a playful smirk. Her presence immediately drew attention, and everyone assumed I was her older cousin visiting for the weekend. My stomach dropped. How could I maintain the illusion with someone who knew the family intimately? "Hello. I've heard so much about you," the young cousin exclaimed, smiling brightly. I forced a practiced smile, lowering my gaze politely. Each word, each gesture had to be flawless. One misstep, and the entire ruse could collapse. Emma stayed close, whispering softly, "Keep calm, you've got this." Her presence was a lifeline, yet the weight of maintaining two identities pressed down on me. Alex wanted to retreat, to let go of the charade, but Cutie required perfection. Every movement was calculated. The tilt of my head, the way my hands rested in front of me, the softness in my voice. The first challenge came immediately. The cousin began asking about summer activities, friends, and shared memories. My heart raced. I had memorized some stories, but improvisation was necessary. I answered carefully, blending rehearsed details with vague responses. Each nod of approval from the cousin brought relief, but the underlying tension remained sharp. A symbolic moment amplified the suspense. While reaching for a plate of cookies, my sleeve brushed the edge of a glass vase. It wobbled precariously, threatening to topple. I froze, holding my breath, before steadying it with a quiet laugh. Everyone seemed oblivious, but my pulse raced. Every object, every gesture, every subtle movement could betray me. The emotional tension escalated when the cousin teased, "You've grown so much. I almost don't recognize you." I smiled, but internally, Alex trembled. Was my voice too low? Were my gestures too practiced? Cutie required refinement, charm, and patience, but Alex feared exposure. Each compliment was a thrill, each question a potential trap. Then came an unexpected near-discovery. A friend of the cousin casually remarked, "You both have the same smile, so alike." Their gaze lingered on me, examining my face as if trying to find a difference. My pulse spiked. I tilted my head slightly, laughed softly, and responded with a carefully neutral comment. Emma's hand brushed my back, a subtle reassurance. The moment passed, but the anxiety remained, simmering beneath the surface. By late evening, I was exhausted but alert. Every word, every gesture, every interaction had been a test. Cutie was growing stronger, more confident, but Alex was fraying at the edges. The dual identity was no longer just a role. It was a complex dance, a delicate balance of charm, improvisation, and careful observation. As the last guest prepared to leave, Mrs. Darlene paused, holding a small gift. "For you, Cutie," she said warmly, handing me a delicate bracelet. The symbolic gesture hit me harder than expected. This small token represented acceptance, but also the fragility of the illusion. One misstep tomorrow could undo everything, and the looming threat of exposure hung in the air like a storm cloud. I retired to a quiet corner, removing my shoes and massaging my feet. Alex's tension remained, but there was a sense of exhilaration too. Cutie had survived a series of escalating tests, navigated near discoveries, and maintained the persona under extreme scrutiny. Yet the pressure was far from over. Tomorrow promised new challenges, unexpected questions, and the constant risk of exposure. The emotional stakes had never been higher, and the climactic conclusion was looming. The next morning, a new challenge awaited. Mrs. Darlene had invited a few neighbors over for coffee, some of whom had known her niece from school. The thought alone made my stomach churn. Every guest was a potential threat. One slip, one word, and Alex's secret would unravel. I dressed carefully, selecting a soft pink blouse and a pleated skirt. My hair was pinned neatly, and subtle makeup highlighted my features. Cutie needed to look natural yet polished, blending seamlessly into the family circle. Every detail mattered. The first moments were deceptively calm. Conversations flowed around me, and compliments came freely. Yet beneath the surface, my nerves were taut. Every laugh, every gesture, every movement was scrutinized, and I felt Alex's anxiety coiled tightly in my chest. Cutie required grace, composure, and charm, but the pressure was mounting. The first twist occurred when a neighbor leaned in with curiosity. "You've grown so much since last summer, but your voice sounds slightly different. Is that normal?" My pulse spiked. I forced a soft, melodic tone, mirroring the niece's natural speech pattern. Relief washed over me as the neighbor smiled and nodded, but my hands trembled slightly. Each interaction was a delicate balance between improvisation and careful mimicry. Then came the emotional test. Mrs. Darlene shared stories of her niece's childhood, expecting responses that matched memories perfectly. Alex's panic flared. Some details were fuzzy. Emma leaned close, whispering guidance, helping me recall anecdotes with precision. I laughed at the right moments, nodded appropriately, and mirrored gestures from past family photos. The tension was suffocating, yet each successful response strengthened Cutie's presence. A symbolic near-disaster escalated the suspense. I reached for a plate of pastries, and my sleeve caught the edge of a teacup, sending it wobbling perilously. My heart leapt into my throat. Time seemed to freeze as I steadied the cup, a quiet laugh escaping my lips. The guests appeared oblivious, but my chest heaved with adrenaline. Each object, each movement, was a potential reveal, and the fragility of my disguise weighed heavily on me. The next obstacle was unexpected. A young cousin, familiar with the family, asked to see my drawings from school. Panic surged. I hadn't prepared for this. Emma nudged me, whispering a quick improvisation. I described past art projects vaguely but confidently, gesturing as if recalling them from memory. The cousin seemed satisfied, and I felt a surge of relief, but Alex's anxiety had not abated. The final twist arrived with Mrs. Darlene herself, smiling warmly, but with a glint of curiosity. "Cutie, you remind me so much of her, almost too much," she said softly. My heart skipped. Alex's instinct was to laugh nervously, but Cutie required poise. I smiled demurely, adjusted my posture, and responded with a gentle, practiced tone. The moment passed, but the tension lingered like a shadow. By the afternoon, I was physically exhausted and emotionally drained. Every interaction had tested my ability to maintain the dual identity, every compliment, and question a subtle evaluation. Yet Cutie had survived, navigating a gauntlet of social scrutiny, near reveals, and symbolic hazards. The persona had grown stronger, more confident, but Alex's vulnerability remained, reminding me of the fragile line I was walking. As the gathering ended and guests departed, I retreated to a quiet corner. Emma squeezed my hand gently. "You did it," she whispered. Relief washed over me, yet I knew the final challenge was looming. The dual identity had survived countless tests, but tomorrow promised new visitors, unexpected questions, and the ever-present risk of exposure. The emotional stakes had never been higher, and the suspense remained tightly wound. Evening fell, and a quiet hush settled over the house. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down, every nerve on edge. Cutie, the persona I had carefully built, now felt inseparable from Alex, but the constant fear of exposure lingered like a shadow in every corner. The ultimate test arrived unexpectedly. Mrs. Darlene's old friend, a sharp-eyed woman who had known the niece since childhood, decided to drop by for a late tea. Her reputation for noticing the smallest inconsistencies preceded her, and my stomach sank. One misstep could unravel weeks of careful planning. As she entered, her eyes scanned the room, lingering on me with an almost imperceptible intensity. "So, you're the niece I've heard so much about," she said, her tone warm yet inquisitive. My pulse quickened. I forced a delicate smile, slightly lowering my gaze. Every gesture had to be flawless, every word precise. The first close call came almost immediately. She began recounting memories from the niece's school days, testing my knowledge. I relied on Emma's whispered cues, improvising where necessary, mimicking the niece's speech patterns and gestures. Each question was a trap, each compliment a test. My hands trembled slightly, but I maintained the poise of Cutie, careful not to reveal Alex's underlying anxiety. Then came a symbolic moment of tension. While reaching for a teacup, my skirt caught on the corner of the table, sending it wobbling dangerously. My heart leapt into my throat. I steadied it just in time, a quiet laugh escaping my lips. The near disaster felt like a metaphor for my entire situation. One small slip, and everything could collapse. The emotional stakes peaked when Mrs. Darlene's friend asked about personal details, favorite hobbies, childhood friendships, and recent events. Alex's mind raced. Some memories were hazy, and hesitation could betray me. I carefully navigated each question, blending vague but confident answers with small gestures of familiarity. The tension was suffocating, yet each successful answer reinforced Cutie's persona. A sudden twist escalated the suspense further. The doorbell rang again, and a delivery arrived, a package addressed to the niece. The visitor insisted on handing it to me personally. My hands shook as I accepted the package, trying to appear natural while secretly fearing that any misstep might expose me. Emma's gentle guidance helped me maintain composure, but my heart pounded relentlessly. The final challenge came when Mrs. Darlene's friend leaned in, smiling but with a glint of curiosity. "You've grown so much, almost like I'm looking at her twin." My pulse skyrocketed. The comment, though seemingly innocuous, highlighted the razor-thin line I was walking between two identities. I smiled softly, adjusted my posture, and responded with a gentle, practiced tone. The moment passed, but the tension lingered like an electric current in the air. By the time the evening ended, I was physically exhausted and emotionally drained. Every interaction had tested the boundaries of Alex and Cutie, every glance, every word, every movement a potential exposure. Cutie had survived the ultimate social gauntlet, but Alex's anxiety remained a constant undercurrent. As the house finally quieted and the guests departed, I sat in a dimly lit corner, massaging my wrists and letting out a long breath. Emma's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with unease. The dual identity had navigated the most intense day yet, but the fragility of the illusion was never far from my mind. The final symbolic moment arrived as I looked into the mirror. Cutie's reflection stared back at me, poised, confident, and radiant. But behind that reflection, Alex's eyes flickered with doubt and fear. The duality was complete, yet delicate, and the suspense remained unresolved. Tomorrow promised new challenges, new questions, and perhaps the ultimate test of secrecy. The house had finally settled into a quiet lull, the echoes of the day fading into soft shadows. I sat on the edge of the couch, Cutie's delicate dress draping neatly over my legs, my hands still trembling slightly from the day's tension. Emma leaned beside me, offering a small, reassuring smile. "You are perfect today," she whispered, but her eyes mirrored my unease. Despite the compliments and the apparent success, my mind raced. Every smile, every compliment, every subtle comparison to the niece had been a test. Alex felt exposed beneath the polished surface of Cutie, aware that one misstep could unravel everything. The exhilaration of maintaining the persona was mingled with a gnawing fear that tomorrow could bring a new challenge or disaster. The symbolic moment came when I noticed the bracelet Mrs. Darlene had given me that morning. It glimmered in the dim light, delicate and beautiful, yet it felt like a tether to this dual identity. Wearing it made me feel more like Cutie than Alex, more like someone who belonged in this world than someone pretending. Yet the bracelet was also a reminder of the precarious balance I had to maintain. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and the illusion could collapse. A sudden sound from the hallway made my heart skip. Footsteps, deliberate, slow, and measured, approached the living room. My body stiffened. Emma's hand tightened around mine. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Darlene's friend peeked in, holding a small envelope. Her eyes, sharp and curious, scanned the room, lingering on me for just a moment too long. "Cutie, a letter for you," she said, her voice calm but inquisitive. She handed the envelope to me and paused, as if studying my reaction. My pulse thundered in my ears. I accepted it carefully, forcing a composed smile, feeling every nerve in my body tense under her gaze. The room felt suspended in time. Alex's thoughts raced. Should I reveal myself? Should I excuse myself and change back? The thrill of maintaining the persona battled with the fear of discovery. Cutie, confident and poised, sat at the edge of the couch, ready to respond with grace, but Alex's heart pounded beneath the surface, reminding me that this was a dangerous game. I opened the envelope cautiously. Inside was a handwritten note, elegantly scripted. "I've noticed something very interesting about you. We need to talk soon." My hands froze. The words were innocent enough on the surface, yet they carried a subtle, thrilling threat. The suspense gripped me immediately. Who exactly had written this? How much had they noticed? The line between Cutie and Alex blurred even further. Emma's voice broke through my racing thoughts. "Whatever it says, we handle it together," she whispered. Her reassurance grounded me slightly, yet the envelope's message lingered in the air like a storm cloud. The reality was clear. The challenges were far from over. New tests awaited, and the precarious balance of my dual identity had never felt so delicate. I glanced at the mirror across the room. Cutie's reflection smiled back, flawless and radiant, but the eyes, Alex's eyes, betrayed the tension, the fear, and the thrill of survival. For the first time, I truly understood that this was more than a disguise. It was a journey of identity, secrecy, and daring deception. The final moment of suspense arrived when I heard the soft click of the front door. A shadow fell across the hallway, tall and unfamiliar. My heart leapt into my throat. Cutie froze, poised and graceful, while Alex's panic surged beneath the surface. The unknown figure's approach promised either exposure or a new twist that could change everything. I could do nothing but hold my breath and wait, the room thick with tension. The audience is left wondering, who is at the door? Will they discover the secret? How long can Alex maintain the delicate balance of pretending to be Cutie? The screen would fade to black here, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, compelled to speculate what happens next. Comments would flood in. Did she recognize him? What's in the letter? How long can he keep pretending?